right there. Welcome, everybody. Happy St. Patrick's Day. This is Drawing Together. My name is Scott Maier, and this is Drawing Together with Artist Network, where we meet every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern, to draw together. So if you're new, we want to know that you can follow along with us. You can find the reference image in the description below. You also see in the chat that I posted a link to a site where you can share your work. So we have a show page for this episode, and you can find all the past episodes at Artist Network on the Drawing Together page. So welcome, everybody. If you're joining from Colorado here in the West, hopefully you've dug yourself out from all the great snow we've had. It's been quite an adventure. Welcome, everybody. I love seeing all the familiar names, people from all over the world joining in. If you're new, shout out where you're viewing from. So today, this is what we're working on. In my mind, for this project, what I'm thinking about is kind of setting us up for a time when it's easier for us to go outside and start sketching people out in public. This is something I did a lot of when I was first starting out, and I think it's a tremendous exercise to pick up a sketchbook, go out in public, malls, airports, things like that, where there's lots of people walking by, picking up a sketchbook and doing quick gesture studies is really helpful. Now this, of course, isn't a quick gesture, but this kind of gives us a kind of a warm up. It gives us a chance to kind of slow down, study the figure, study the form bit, with the idea of going out on location and sketching. So that's what we have here. Again, the reference image is in the description below, so you can bring that up and follow along with that if you want to work from something larger. This does get recorded, and so you can follow along from the recording if you'd like. If we have any sort of buffering issues or if the signal drops, just stick with us. We'll try to get it back up. It is live, so things happen. You can see I did this preparatory drawing. It's a little bit smaller. This is about an 8x10. Today I'll be working on a 9x12, and that's what the reference is sized to. So I had to make a few kind of minor adjustments to the proportions to get it to fit properly on the 8x10. For materials, I've got really just simple graphite. In my mind, I'm thinking this is something that you could take just a regular yellow number 2 pencil, or if you have a full set, just something easy out into the field and start drawing. I'm working with a 3B, and then there's Derwent Onyx pencil, which is really dark. I've got the dark one, so it gives me a little bit darker, partly because it helps to display on the camera properly. I started toning the paper, so this is a smooth white paper, and I want to just start to build up just a tone on the surface. Again, partly for it to show up on camera. So these early stages are pretty light, especially when we're working with graphite. So I'm going to try to get through those quickly. Hopefully you can see properly. Trusty blending stump, which is one of those tools that I often don't bring with me on location, but now that I've been using it a lot more, I may. And then I've got a variety of erasers. So I've got this slim rubber eraser. I've got this retractable one that I should sharpen up a little bit more. I may do that a little bit later. And I've got, of course, my kneaded eraser. So that's it. And a paper towel to kind of wipe things down. So as I tone the paper. So again, I'm kind of toning the paper partly for the benefit of the camera. But I think this has become more of a habit for me when working with graphite. So then I can also work negatively. I can work subtractively, and it helps me to control the value range a little bit more. When I'm painting on location, I like to get rid of the white kind of as quickly as possible, because that intensity of the white, that high value range, can key things differently in your work. Everything becomes calibrated to that, and so the first marks that you lay down can often feel darker than they actually are, just because they're in the context of all that white. So knocking down the value on the surface of the paper can be a little helpful. Now this exercise is kind of less about really getting the values right and more about proportions and trying to create something that looks like a convincing figure. And so I tried to choose this reference image. I found it on Pixabay, which is a site for free images to use for creative purposes. And I went on there and I tried to find something that might simulate an actual experience. So if you're out on location, you see somebody sitting there, you ask them, hey, do you mind if I do some sketching while you're waiting? This might be something that gets set up for you. And I also want to shout out to anybody, if you have any questions, Feel free to type them out in all caps. Any observations? This is all about kind of sharing our processes, helping each other. I know the last few episodes you have all done an amazing job helping me through some of the tricky spots, so I really appreciate that. And if you're new and you're wondering what we're talking about, again, you can kind of go back through and watch all the previous episodes. I think this is episode 85. The last one with the truck was was some trouble. That was a hard one there. So, but I saw some fantastic drawings that you all posted. Let's see. So, how do I want to begin this? I think in general, when for all drawing, I think about establishing a quick gesture. And what that is really just an initial reaction. And I've seen so many different approaches to gestures because this is something that becomes really personal to you. These are those immediate reactions, that kind of almost working from the subconscious. You're just going, and you're trying not to overthink things in the initial gesture. And so I may actually kind of navigate the gestures differently, depending on that day, how I'm feeling that day. And I know when you're in the zone, when you do a lot of gestural drawing, it's a skill that can really improve rapidly. And kind of inversely, conversely, you've got if you don't do it a lot, then that skill can get lost. And I find that that's kind of what's happened for me is I've kind of tailored my gestural drawing to these episodes here and these subjects, but I haven't really worked with a figure at all. And so I'm a bit out of shape when it comes to that. So we'll see how this all comes together. You can start to see this kind of ghostly image there of this. So what I'm looking at is trying to build just a rough map of the masses of the figure. So a lot of squinting with the eyes. Using the side of the pencil, this is the 3B. So fairly soft, not all that dissimilar from what you might use if you use a yellow number 2. It's a little bit softer. But what I'm trying to do is starting to see it as a mass. Another way to kind of navigate a gesture is to focus on the contour. So you may be looking at the outer edges and creating more of a line drawing. And then another way to approach a gesture is through what I call an inside-out drawing. So you start with the inner axis, and then you kind of build your way out from the form. So you might look at trying to identify what the angle to the head might be compared to the torso, compared to the legs. And you're just looking at the axis or the path that those features might fall along. And then you work your way out from that line to define the contour or the rest of the form. So those are kind of 3 main ways that I conceive of kind of gestural drawing. And if you're working with, say, pen and ink, if you're out on location and you're working with pen and ink, that might direct you in a different kind of direction from there as well. So you may think about things differently. But the idea right here is about get information on the page quickly. And from this, we can start to adjust the proportions. And that I kind of talked a bit about this last week as well, that kind of thinking about the idea of drawing as essentially you're constantly refining the gesture. So much of what happens in drawing can be accounted for in these early stages, and then what the rest of the drawing process looks like is kind of refining that process, refining the proportions, the values, and kind of building from there. So just kind of a things I've been thinking about a lot lately. Now I've got him placed pretty far over, more centered right now. So then I have to ask myself, do I want to kind of move this over? How important is that composition for me? Or is this going to be about the figure? In that preparatory drawing, I spent more time really kind of mapping out the composition and matching it 1-to-1. One of the things that helps me right now is I've got this raised bar at the end of the table. The paper is parallel with that, and so I can use that as a guide to map the the bench that he's sitting on and get a relatively straight line. And if you don't have that, you can kind of use that same approach, but run your hand along the edge of the paper, and that can be your guide. So kind of define that, that distance from the bottom of the page, and kind of lock your finger along that edge, and then just you can kind of feel it as you glide across, and use that as a guide. So, all right, just check and see if there's any other questions. Hello, everybody from everywhere. Sorry, I'm not gonna be able to shout out to everybody. This one, it may take me a little while to get through this, but so I want to keep things moving. And I think at this point, I'm going to leave the figure where it is. I kind of like that it's more centered for the purpose of this this exercise, and I may try to make him a little bit larger. So I did like that in the reference photo that there is there's an asymmetry to it. There's a nice 2/3, 1/3 balanced composition there, where he has a focal point occupies the left third of the composition. I'm sorry, the right third of the composition. And but I think for this, I really want to get into the figure more quickly. How's everybody else doing? Anybody else following along? How's your gesture coming? I want to continue to build up more tone on the page. Part of this is what I like about building up the tone is that it's a great way to kind of clear my head, kind of get me focused on drawing, kind of shedding all the other parts of the day that are impacting the moment. And I want to try to get myself into that headspace to draw. And so toning the page just allows me to kind of engage with the materials a little bit and warm up. That was always a part of art classes for us, was you just do some warm-up gestures, and that was always really helpful. And it's one of those things that is kind of just like physical exercise. Sometimes we forget to warm up, and it can be helpful. So, all right, so let me think here. Before I go any farther, I need to take some stock of the reference. And I need to determine what am I going to use for a base measurement to establish the composition. Not the composition, but the proportions. And I want to kind of use that throughout the drawing. And so let me think here. I think what I want to do is, we see a notch in the shirt right at the base of his neck. And if I take that distance then to the top of the head, that can be a decent base unit. And so what I'm doing is I have the reference image in front of me, closing one eye to flatten my depth perception, holding my pencil out in front of me, and I'm aligning the top part of the pencil with the top of his head, sliding my finger down until it aligns with that notch in his shirt. And if I carry that measurement down, it takes me right to the top of his knee. So let me think if I can kind of indicate, I want to establish kind of the general axis to his head, indicate where the top of his head might be. His chin, jawline is going to be somewhere down there. And all of these things are going to change, so we kind of sneak up on these proportions. We kind of get close, and then we gradually refine it. We get a little bit more information as we go through the drawing, and that informs our other proportions. And we just keep building from there. So I can start to then identify where would that notch be, or the top of the head. That becomes a measurement that I can then compare, place the top of his knee, then somewhere right around here. And then now I can measure that down again, one more. So I'll take that measurement again, top of his head to that notch in his shirt, measure that down from the notch to the top of the knee, and then from the knee down about halfway down the leg. Now what I'm worried about is it might run off the page. And that takes me down to the shoe. Yeah, so that's going to put his shoe way down here. So what I'm doing is I'm taking those measurements, carrying them down and seeing from top to bottom to see how that fits on the page. And it's not quite going to fit. So now I'm grateful that I took some time just to work out a quick gesture before I started to refine anything, because I can move it without having lost any significant amount of time. All right, so the bench, what I'll do is I'll place the bench about 2 of those distances high. So again, the height of the head to the notch in the shirt is about 1 unit. And I have to move up from the bar there, 1, 2. That would move that up here. So what I think I need to do is actually now adjust the height of the head. So this seems a bit off. So why don't I'll kind of work backwards now, just trying to think through, I kind of talk through some of the thought process that I have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the base of the shoe here. And I kind of like looking at the distance up here. It's pretty close to what I see in the reference, but maybe I'll bring that up a little bit. And maybe what I'll do is I'll move the notch up, maybe up here. So now this is the notch right here, and I'm going to make that the top of the head, see how that works out. So then the top of the knee would be here. There, 1, 2. Middle of the leg. And then down to about the shoe. So that's a little bit better. I've got a mess on the page now, but I have more information that I can work with. And now let me see. Well, that doesn't quite make sense what's happening here. Okay, put his foot here. And the bench is going to be somewhere right up now. It's going to move that bench up here. And I'm keeping all those old lines on the page. I can clean those up better. It's one of the advantages to toning the page first, is that it allows these layers to lift a little bit more easily and move around more effectively. Let's see. Brenda Brush Art is asking, what's the difference between a carbon pencil and an Onyx? I haven't found an Onyx pencil yet. So these Onyx are equivalent to what's the Prismacolor makes them the ebony pencils. So these are really soft graphite. And then a carbon pencil is, what I've read about them is that they're more of a blend between charcoal and graphite. So you get these rich darks from them. So, but I believe that the Onyx and an ebony pencil are going to be just solid graphite, pure graphite for you, just really soft. And I really like the smoothness of them. All right. Donna, welcome. Trying to chat last week, couldn't see the drawing, still barely visible. My iPad is set to the brightest setting. Huh. I'd be curious, is anybody else able to see at least some of these darker masses, or is this kind of a broader issue, or anybody else have some suggestions? Thank you for calling that out. I'm not quite sure. I think the different display settings can make a difference, and I don't know enough about the tech. I'm sorry about that, but we'll see if we can get that figured out for you. I know these graphite drawings are a little bit light. I'm working on one for next week, and it's going to be on toned paper with charcoal and white charcoal. And I think that's going to be a little bit better for that visibility. Let's see. So I'm just starting to kind of give myself a little bit more information about the kind of more of the details. I'm kind of focusing on that midsection. I'm using the side of the pencil intentionally because I want to keep the marks fairly broad, and I want to keep them light on the page. Looking at that angle across the top of his arms, leveling out the shoulders. And I'm gonna give myself a little bit more information before I start to evaluate the proportions. Again, I need to double check them. Let me get rid of this. I'm just going to tap out using the rubber eraser. Rather than a dark mark, I'm just going to tap and then smudge, and that gets rid of those marks. All right. All right, so we're getting some comments that it seems to be showing up. I'd be interested actually if you've got your screen to the brightest. I wonder what would happen if you were to actually lower the brightness, like kind of midway, to see if that shows up any better. I have no idea if that will actually work, but yeah, it could be kind of blowing out the image. So at this point, one of the things that I realize that I'm doing is I have the full-size image here on the screen, but I also have the small thumbnail that you're seeing right below me. And I'm finding myself working from that small thumbnail a little bit more. And it's interesting that, you know, how I feel like I understand the basic form differently from the smaller thumbnail. All right, so as I fill in these dark areas, I'm trying to prioritize the shadow shapes more than anything, but also looking at the contour. So it's kind of a blend between contour drawing and mass drawing the larger shapes. And then I want to kind of focus on the details of the feet a little bit later, and we'll see if we can kind of dial those in. But right now, again, this is still just now like working with that gesture, continuing to refine. Now I want to double check those proportions a bit. Actually, I need to do some subtractive drawing here to just give myself that more of an indication of that notch on his shirt, so I can take that measurement. So I've got that measurement, measure down, top of the knee should be right about here. That means I can come up a little bit more under the arms. I take that and I'm going to measure that down again, so down top of the knee, about the middle of the leg, and then down to about the bottom of the foot. So I just want to double check again. So much of figure drawing is about working the proportions. I think the foot might actually come down a little bit farther. So I think I have enough room. I hope. I've definitely had that happen more than once. You work on a drawing and you think, I got it. It's all going to fit just fine. And then you finish all the other parts and you work down to the bottom and you realize, oh, it's not going to fit. And I'm kind of taking that risk right now. We'll see how it all plays out. All right, so now I'm gonna, what do I want to do? Let's see. All right, thank you, Rocket434. Appreciate the comments. I try to change things up in the back a bit. It's been a little while. Let's see. I'm sorry, Donna, that it's not working. Yeah, I understand these early material, these early stages in the graphite are a little hard to see, and I've gone down to a 3B, which is a really dark graphite, and I try to balance it between charcoal and graphite for the series. So next week we'll be switching to charcoal, but I like to provide a little bit for everybody. And again, for the purposes of this, I want to kind of focus on a pencil, because it's generally the easiest tool, the most accessible tool for us. So I'm going to do my best to try to get through it quickly to try to get to some of those darker stages. So what do I need to do here? I think what I need to do is that that bench has such a large dark mass. I'm going to angle sight down to from the head down to this this part of the bench there, the support for the bench, to kind of place that. And I'm going to do the other angle sighting on the other side. So somewhere right around there. I'm going to quickly block that in. And this is kind of running off here. Because when you're drawing people, especially in public, you don't really know how long they're going to sit. So if we were to imagine this guy sitting there, he's waiting for a bus or something, you know, that may come along in, you know, 30 seconds or maybe 20 minutes. We don't really know. And so I'm going to try to work quickly to, again, kind of practice those experiences. And I'm finding that this bar, while helpful in most drawings, is kind of being a pain today. I feel like it's getting in the way a lot, and I should have moved the paper up on the. I should have moved the paper up on the board a little bit more for me to make it a little bit easier for me. All right, is anybody else following along? Anybody at a different stage in the drawing? I'm going to do some subtractive drawing, just kind of get that highlight. And this isn't about having a lot of control. Again, just kind of blocking in. And then there's some light down in this area. I'm going to kind of feather that out. And just kind of establish the large large areas of light and dark. And that, for me, I find that it's been helpful when focusing on the figure. I get myself into trouble when I don't take the time to build the structure of light and shadow and really stay focused on the large masses. Right now, every part of me wants to get in there and start doing the folds in the pants and like some that you can see some of the muscles in the arms, all that cool stuff. And it's an instinct that I really have to fight. And I'm kind of talking through that now because it helps hold me accountable. And I want to try to stay with these larger forms a little bit more. So I've got my eraser right here so I can easily pick that up. And it makes some kind of notes about value structure. So just kind of lifting off a little bit of light on the legs. Those are too light, so I'm not focusing on really getting the specific values correct. I'm just trying to understand basic form. So basically, if it's being hit by light, I'm going to try to make that lighter. If it's in shadow, darken it up. And see those large forms. And so in that thinking, then, you know, these forms down here kind of blend into one another. So those are what we call shadow shapes. So they're a combination of the cast shadow and the form shadow, the part of the leg that's in shadow and the shadow that's being cast by the legs. So there's Bjorn is asked a good comment there. Isn't the section between his arms and neck too large? Yes, there are a lot of things that are off, and I think what I need to do is actually I don't know if I need to move the arms up or bring the shoulders down, right? And so I'm kind of building areas around there, but that's an area that I definitely see as off as well. So, and if you're new. I just want you all to know that Bjorn's comment, that's exactly what we're looking for here, is shout out all these comments. I may not be at that stage in the drawing, which is fine. or I may have kind of a plan to deal with it, or I may have completely ignored it. Those have all been the cases before. But I really appreciate having those comments and just kind of raise awareness of those things. So feel free to shout out observations and comments. Don't worry if we haven't, if we just haven't gotten to that part yet. Okay. What do I want to do? I think, let's see, this is starting to become kind of a focal point, that top of the knee. And so kind of thinking about what Bjorn was just saying, I'm going to kind of build my way up, and now and I have to look at then the proportions of the arms and the distance between them and the knee, the distance up to the shoulders, and start to adjust from there. And because I'm making all these changes, I'm again making a verbal commitment to myself, so I don't forget, to then double check the proportions from there. Because it's really easy to get stuck and sucked into the what we have. We already have mapped out here. And not go back and fix those proportions. So I'm kind of adding a little bit of definition, in part to help me with those proportions, because I'm not really seeing the edges when there are these larger forms. I've kind of lost the specific edges a little bit. So now I can do some kind of positive and negative drawing, and I can still see, as a shape, this doesn't match what I'm seeing in the reference. Just as Bjorn said, this distance is too great. And so one of the things I haven't really checked is the width. And so before I shorten this even farther and just keep bringing everything in, I'm going to check the width, and I'm going to take that same measurement, the height of the head to that notch in the shirt, and compare it to the width. And it's about 1.5 times the width. So if this becomes my unit, my base unit, top of the head to the notch, turn it this way, we have 1, and about 1.5 would bring us over here. So I can go a little bit wider. Now, how would I want to do that? So in order to place that, what I'll do is I'll take my knee, and I can see how the notch in the shirt is directly above that. I can take a plumb line from that notch down right through the middle of the knee, and I can take the measurement. This measurement here, if I carry this across, it should take me just to the right of that notch. Hopefully these corrections that I'm making are making sense. So if I'm moving too fast, or if it's not showing up on camera the way that is useful for you, then let me know. So I'm actually going to move the head over a little bit. Again, looking at that notch in the shirt, if I draw a plumb line through that, kind of it brings the head back a little bit more, really tilts it. And so in that way, again, when you have one dimension off, you can correct it either by fixing the other dimension or correcting that one specific dimension. So in this case, again, kind of building off Bjorn's initial observation that this felt too tall, it becomes a combination of bringing the height down as well as pulling it out wider to bring that all together. And then we'll kind of work on that, see how that looks. It still feels too tall to me. So I need to work that out a little bit more. And maybe it's a matter of bringing the arms up. It's one of the things I like about working with the toned, just toning the paper first is it allows me to use the eraser as that drawing tool, not just a correction, but I can work both positively and subtractively. Kind of in my way there. This can come up. So just doing some angle sighting there. So if you don't know what angle sighting is, if you have the reference in front of you, close one eye, align your pencil with the angle that you're targeting. In this case, I was targeting this angle here of his folded arms. Placing it on top, locking the wrist, swinging over and placing that on top of your drawing. So you're comparing one angle in the reference to the angle in your drawing and building an understanding of those dimensions from there. And so now what I'm doing is I'm taking this angle, which is too vertical at this point. What I find myself doing when I do this is sometimes I'll know that he's kind of leaning backwards, so I'll actually tilt my pencil back, and that doesn't always help. I want this to be a two-dimensional thing. That's why you close one eye. So I'm holding this vertically, aligning it with the angle, and let's see if I give the tilt to of his head. I think this needs to come out here, and then this elbow projects out a little bit farther. And that may fix the height issue over here as well. So in this way, we're going to keep refining, and this is one of those things where we can practice in the studio like this, and it sets you up for working on location when your time might be limited. Again, we don't know how long a person like this would be sitting. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. It really becomes kind of a mental muscle that you learn to flex, and you get to the point of the correct proportions more rapidly the more you practice this. And so I kind of encourage really taking the time here, and again, we have this kind of safe space to do it in, and really dial in those proportions while we have that opportunity, and it will again speed up the whole process when you're out on location. And we're going to keep refining. But I'm feeling better about this proportion. So we have kind of roughly a box, right? So we can use angle sighting to get the angles correct. So his shoulders are generally horizontal. There's an angle to his folded arms that we can look at. We can transfer over. And then we have an angle to the kind of the upper arms there. But we can also do an angle across those. So we can work between those 6 measurements back and forth to help double check the proportions. And I think we're really close. And there might be some kind of minor adjustments, but we'll deal with those as we get to them. So now what I want to do is start to kind of mass in some more of the specific features down here in the legs. So there's a lot of blurred vision happening, and trying to think back and forth between the positive space and the negative space. So we're looking at the shape of the figure as well as the negative space, the shape around that figure, to help control that. And it's just like putting together a puzzle. And again, we talked about that a lot in this series. The drawing process, the drawing develops in the same way your understanding of the form develops. This is a record of the development of your understanding of what this subject is. And so we're just putting together puzzles here, which is a lot of fun. Gathering information. As we gather that information, we're going to better understand the subject. Our drawings are going to improve. And as our drawing improves, we better understand the subject even further. So they kind of feed one another. So wiping that down, that helps you kind of unify all the marks. So as the marks kind of build up, they can get distracting. And when that does, you can kind of wipe things down. But this is feeling a little bit better now in terms of the basic proportions. And then again, but that never stops. We're always going to keep checking those. What do I want to do now? What do I want to do? I'm going to keep, I think now is a good time for me to map out the placement of the shoes, which I think, yes, looks like it's still roughly lining up with where I had intended them to land. So we made some adjustments, but it hasn't affected the overall height of the figure, which is nice. I want to take an angle for that folded leg, the one that's sitting on top. Kind of my arm is in its own way. Angle of that leg that's anchored to the ground. Come on, I gotta get my arm out of the way. There we go. And so what I'm doing there is specifically looking for, if you take an angle sighting and you follow along the path of the leg, where does it intersect this shoulder? Where does this leg intersect the head? And so kind of anchoring those two together and making visual connections between the different parts of the body so that we're not treating the top and the bottom halves as separate forms. They're always, we're always double checking the relationship between them. And as I get down to the foot, I can drop a plumb line along there to see how far out that foot extends beyond the elbow here, which is not very far. So that shoe is going to end up being somewhere right around here. So just giving myself taking an initial stab. Let me drop that on there, see how it looks, see if it's in the right spot. Roughly is. How's that? Yeah, so, but I've got a little indicator there that says this is roughly the rough idea, and then we'll have rough placement of it, and then we'll refine it even farther. So I think I'm going to switch now to the dark, and I'll probably just work with this for the rest of the drawing here. All right, howdy y'all, sketch Shenaver. Deanne Webb, the arms need to rise and his bottom needs to move out of the bench. Yes. Yeah, so that's all. I gotta look at that. Yeah, let me double check that. Those are good observations there. Hello from Kentucky. These fast horses and tasty bourbon. Nice. Hello from New Zealand. Welcome. Jamaica. Awesome. And then Rocket 434. About 400 cotton swabs to dazzle. Nice. Yes, the mad moments go. Yeah, the bus is taking a while, which is awesome. Yeah, I think this whole thing needs to come down. So what I want to do before I kind of make this kind of more concrete. So going back to Deanne's comment about the relationship between the figure and the bench. You know, I've kind of set this as an anchor now. And so now that I'm feeling more confident about this shape, you know, I've kind of, the top of the head is still a little bit nebulous, a little ambiguous. So I might need to make that a bit more concrete. Kind of bring this over here. What I'm looking at is that angle here to the shoulder. I'm going to try to find a line that represents the central axis of his head. Give a little bit more kind of solidity to that form. And now I can look at, I'm going to look at the negative space. I follow along down here, and this is where I see what you're saying is that this bench is too high, especially if we look at that negative shape there. And see where it intersects his pants. But I also want to use that dimension. So if my base unit is this height, how does that compare to that negative space? And it's this distance here should be a little bit greater than this distance. Right now they're equivalent. So let me see what happens if I bring this down. And I'm using that, using this bar as a guide to help. I want to make sure that the line on both sides of the figure line up, so I can kind of quickly map that out. And then I'm just looking at, just kind of doing a quick check-in with the base of the base of these supports for the bench. See how that feels. And that's feeling a little bit better. Now another way to kind of, I want to kind of double check that now, of course, but as I lower this and I focus on that negative space right in here, I can double check that. So this distance should be now a little bit greater than that base unit, which is not. So what do I need to do here? Let's see. Measure down. What I'm realizing is throwing me off is there's a roundedness to this pencil that I wasn't paying attention to when I was making those initial proportion observations. So I need to do a better job at that. So I'm going to take that measurement, and it's just got to come down a little bit farther. And I'm going to feather that out. This is all a mess, but we'll clean that up in a little bit. Drawing should be messy, at least from my perspective. I know that's not, I know that there's a lot of you that may not feel that way, so but that's just the way I think about it, but it doesn't make it the only way to draw. I like the mess of it all. All right, so let me think. I need to clarify this a little bit more. There we go. All right, and now what do I need to do? Let me compare the height of the head to the height of those bench supports, and because right now they're not appropriate. They got to come down. I think everything's got to lower a little bit more. So this, from the reference photo, things are getting cropped off the bottom a little bit more. And I'm going to have to live with that rather than adjust the other proportions, just so we can get through this, because we're almost an hour in already. So I want to get through more of the rendering of the figure, which means that compositionally I'm going to run into some trouble. So he's going to be kind of sitting on the bottom of the page in a way that I wouldn't like for a finished work, but again, that's what we're doing here, drawing together, is this is all about the practice of it, not the perfection. So we contemplate drawing, the act of drawing versus the drawing. And if my objective here was to create something that is more finished and polished, I would have to make those changes. But because it's not, and this is an exercise, I'm just going to make a mental note of that and be okay with it. All right, so I'm going to clear my head a little bit, work on that background. I love having areas like this where you can just make marks. And again, this is a great way for me just to, I can progress through the drawing, but I also give my brain a little break, because that's the thing that stood out to me most when I really started drawing regularly is how exhausting it is, because it requires so much mental energy. It can be relaxing, which it often is. It's very grounding for me, but it is also, it can also require a lot of mental energy. That focus can be both energizing and can be energy draining. All right. What am I doing here? What am I looking for? I just want to make these not so distractingly small. He looks very large on the bench now, and I don't want that to happen. So I do want to spend a little bit of time getting the getting these supports dialed in a little bit more. So shifting to that negative space, I think I need to, I'm going to do some angle sighting from the elbow to find the front end of this. And I don't need a whole lot of detail, but I think getting the proportions a little bit more dialed in is going to be good for everything. So like I said, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this. Where's everybody else at? Hello, Jerry. It's good to see you again. Hello from India. Psycho Gaming, you draw enemy. Awesome. Welcome, welcome. Let's see. Okay. Donna Han, can you put your reference photo in front of the camera? Let me see if I can do this. Let's see what happens. So this is the reference that we're working from. Again, there's a link to it in the description below below the video. If you might have to expand the description, you should see a link for it, and then you can bring that up full size there. It sounds like if you're working on an iPad, I don't quite know how that all appears. I've only ever done it on the computer here, so I'm sorry. But yeah, this is the full size reference here. Okay, so you're going to take a quick photo of it. All right, so I'll leave that up. Hopefully, and then what I need to do is move that behind. And then I'm going to, yeah, that's about as big as I can get right there if you need to take a screenshot of it. So hopefully that helps. And then I'm going to move that back. The magic of technology. Don't want to move that. All right, hopefully that helped. Thank you for your patience. All right, so back at it. That actually, yeah, it helped me to kind of reframe things a little bit. We talk about that a lot as part of the drawing process, to step back from your work, kind of put it into a new context. So look at it from a distance, take a photo of it, look at it as a thumbnail, turn it upside down. We have lots of different strategies, but it's all about changing the relationship between you and your drawing so that you see it in a different way, because our brain is always kind of calibrating and adjusting to things, and it can be helpful to kind of shake that up. All right, so I'm feeling better about the overall proportions. This looks off here, so that's, let me take that measurement. So this distance here, right there, should equal, that should place, yeah, the edge of that bench right in here. So we've got to structure something like this that we'll keep refining. There you go. Okay, that feels a little less distracting now in terms of the proportions. Like, it may not, like I said, it may not be 100% dialed in, but I'm going to call it good for now. And just build up some of the value in that background. Unify the forms, you know, him and that cast shadow there. Smooth things out a little bit. So if you have like strong streaks and you're looking for a smoother gradation, you know, you take multiple passes at it, try to change the direction. So you're doing some cross hatching. And I like to use the side of the pencil because it creates a more broad stroke. And then each time you do it, you can start to target the light areas. So, you know, right in here, for example, it gets a little bit light, and try to then fill that in, smooth it out. You know, luckily this is kind of a concrete wall that he's leaning against, so it doesn't need to be smooth. But I also don't want the streaks to be distracting, so I can take a little bit of time to smooth it all out. And now I know with figure drawing, you know, so much is there can be so much emphasis on proportions, right? And you may have learned certain proportions for the body. You know, you know, if a general figure is 7 or 10 heads tall, and that can be very helpful to learn those. I don't have anything like that memorized. I don't have those proportions locked down. Oh, Donna, I hope that worked for you to get that photo. But kind of going back to those proportions, I don't have them kind of memorized as kind of a set. But I think in general, using the head as a unit of measure to compare to the rest of the body height can be helpful. And I think from my perspective, if you're going to be doing a lot of figure drawing, it can be helpful to learn anatomy and basic proportion specifically for the arts. I took a course called Anatomy for Artists, and so it's less about learning the specific you know, terms, anatomically correct terms, and more about really understanding how muscles and bones work together, and what the structure is, and how you can apply it to a painting or a drawing, and how having an understanding of the skeletal form can be helpful. But at the same time, I also like to think that the figure is no different than any other object. You know, drawing in itself it's a set of decisions that you make, and we each have our own ways of navigating the drawing process. And we may make different decisions as artists, but that ultimately comes down to, like, what it comes down to is that you make decisions, what materials you're going to use, you know, what you're going to do first and next, etc. And you can learn different ways of thinking from different artists. And I find it helpful for me to constantly remind myself that, you know, drawing the figure is fundamentally no different. It's the same set of decisions as I would make if I were drawing an apple or, you know, a simple box. You know, it's just a more complex form. But, you know, for some of you that may not work quite as well. So there's some random thoughts there as I'm thinking about drawing the figure. Let's see. I think what I'm trying to do here is I need to give myself a little bit more information. I don't want to get bogged down in drawing the features at this point, but I do need to give myself a little bit more information about the head, because right now that's distracting, and I feel like that's influencing how I'm interpreting the rest of the form. So if I give myself a little bit more, it might help me to better understand some of the other proportions. So that's what I'm thinking about right now. I think I do need to lift off a little bit more value. So I'm going to take the kneaded eraser and just kind of press and lift. And so there's kind of both a positive and negative kind of focus here. So as I'm thinking here, I'm thinking about how his head turns a bit into shadow. We get light across the front. It kind of tapers off a little bit, but then doing some negative drawing here to start to visualize some of the proportions and the structure of the head here. But I'm going to keep it a general form. Jerry's is asking, have I been skiing? I have not been skiing. I don't know. It could be just a different light today. I guess a lot of shoveling lately, so that could have done it. You know, we got a lot of snow. But I gotta. Perhaps I know my daughter. She got a little pink in the face after some sledding the other day. All right, so there's just kind of a mannequin head that has a little bit more structure. And now I think what I want to do is I'm feeling better about those proportions. So I'm going to work my way down and start to refine them. And as I'm going through, it's going to be a constant shift between this overhand grip and then this tripod grip. So the tripod grip really kind of engages the tip of the pencil more, so I get that nice fine edge. And then the overhand, I can work with the side of the pencil more. And I want to be careful when I'm working in the tripod grip, because that can have a tendency to emboss the page in a way that could be difficult to make it hard to adjust marks later on. So I'm just trying to be really sensitive to those marks. And I think what I need to do is I want to block in that shape, refine that shape as a kind of medium to dark form, and then go even darker with the darkest shadows, like underneath the collar there. But now it's about refining that form, and I'm going to start by focusing on kind of the positive shape of his upper body. And then you know, I can gently erase to kind of sharpen up if I need to correct in the negative space as well. I think what I want to do actually is I need to do more of that inside out drawing. Start from the center and work my way out to that edge and kind of back and forth. And as I move down in here, I can kind of refine this edge a bit more. You know, so you look at this, you know, this thin shape here of the sleeve. You know, there's both a positive and negative shape. There's the shape of the arm, there's the shape of the shirt, and they impact one another. Let's see. Believer Keeper Figuricity is an awesome website to fine-tune our anatomy skills of all shapes and nationalities and gender. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. I had not heard of that one, so that's it's good to have those resources. I know we here at Artist Network, we've got a lot of figure drawing, and figure painting videos as well. A lot of good resources out there, but I gotta check that one out. All right, so as I kind of work through here again, I'm trying to treat it as a solid value for the most part. I'm not going to be super kind of picky about it, but I'm going to try to see these as solid values, and then, like I said, go in and add some of the darker shadows in a bit. And as I move down here and I'm looking at his bare arms, again, it's this constant fluctuation in the mind and on the page between the positive and the negative space. And so as I draw his elbow here, for example, I'm thinking more about the negative space and working up to that edge. And as I come underneath, I might be thinking more about the positive shape and drawing that shadow that's on his arm, and kind of working back and forth between those two. And as I do that, I just want to be careful of those halos along the edge. So I'm going to kind of work up to that edge and then back and kind of feather it out so that I don't have a dark kind of halo around that edge that flattens out the drawing. So So it's kind of in and out, back and forth to that edge. And then carry that underneath as well, so I don't have like a harsh line coming down here. And again, this is where it's helpful to kind of think about the pencil grip that you're using. And I mostly use an overhand grip, and then try to be strategic when I'm using a tripod grip. And now this is where, you know, we've done a lot of still life drawing, and we've talked about kind of compound curves, especially along edges. And the figure is a tremendous subject to work with in order to refine that. And so what that means is that as you follow along the contour, you have kind of a general angle to that form. And then as you look into it more closely, you'll have this alternating sequence of concave and convex forms. And that can be really helpful to study. And so you take that general form, and then you start to break it apart into more specific edges, so that it kind of brings that to life. And in that way, if you look at somebody like Ingres or Degas, you know, these great artists that they use line beautifully, you know, that's what they're doing. They're capturing that just the sensitivity between the concave and convex forms that suggest then the three-dimensional structure of the object that they're representing. So kind of looking at that, kind of looking at now the shadow, that upper arm. You know, that's crossing on top of that lower arm. And then that lower arm is in shadow down here, kind of feathers out a little bit. And when I'm in my mind, I'm also recognizing that I can lift out brighter highlights on the arm. So I might be kind of preparing myself for that a little bit. And then drawing that darker shadow here on underneath the elbow. And then I think I need to refine this shape a little bit. Bring that up even farther. And now I can look at the path for that arm. Again, I have that general angle, but now I can look at it more specifically. How it we have this more of this concave or convex bump here, kind of straightens out a little bit in here. And we have this very, very specific curve as that arm kind of tucks in under there. So again, it's starting with the big form, and then breaking it apart and trying to find more the subtle details along that edge there. He's got his hand here is kind of poking up behind there. All right, what do I want to do now? All right, so I think I want to keep moving through the figure. Before I add more detail to the shirt, I'm going to move down and bring the rest of the drawing up to that same stage here. If anybody is new, I want to welcome you. Love to hear where you are viewing from. This is Drawing Together. My name is Scott Maier, and this is Artist Network, our YouTube channel. And then at Artist Network, we have resources for artists. We have our magazines, Artist Magazine, Watercolor Artist, Pastel Journal, Southwest Art. We have our video program. provide resources, and then this is one of them. So we meet every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern, to draw together. We've been doing it for almost a year now. Almost exactly, I think it was the 23rd of March last year that we aired the first episode. I can't believe it. We're on episode 85. But if you're new, you can draw along. This comes up as a recording at the end. So if you're coming in a little bit late and you want to follow along, you can watch the recording a little bit later. You can kind of start back from the beginning, and you'll find the reference material in the description below. So that's that image that's right below me. You can bring up as a full screen and draw from that. I have a list of the materials that I'm working with, but I also encourage you to experiment and try different materials, what works for you. This isn't necessarily how to draw as much as we're just drawing because it's an important part of every artist's practice is to draw, is to paint, and to do things, that intentionally develop our skills. And so what we're doing here is we're taking some time to draw a figure in preparation for the moments when we can head out in public and maybe do some people watching and sketching. And all right, so what I need to do here is kind of refine this edge. So as I'm doing this, we talk about that a lot in this show, is that drawing is, so much of the drawing process is about splitting your attention and moving around the drawing. So as I'm making these marks and I'm making observations of, say, this portion of the figure, I'm doing quick check-ins with other features. And so, I'm looking at this bump here that looks like where his pocket would be. And I'm thinking about the negative space here. I'm thinking about where it aligns with that elbow, where it aligns with the knee, and what this overall shape is. And so again, drawing is about a set of decisions that you make. And it can be really clumsy at first. When you're new to drawing, it can be overwhelming, just like any other activity. Like your brain is just hyper focused because there's so many things to think about. But over time, a lot of those decisions just become more automated. They become second nature. They become part of your subconscious there. And so this show, I'm trying to talk through some of the decisions I'm making, and also you all share the decisions you're making, where you're at, where you might get stuck, things like that. So I'm definitely feeling like this is too short. I'm worried I'm going to run off the bottom of the page, and I'm going to have to potentially live with those earlier comments that I made about how important it is to stick with those main forms so that it doesn't run off the page, and I think I'm really I think that's going to happen, and it'll be a good learning experience. I'll show you what not to do. All right, so what I'm doing is kind of some angle sighting here. So I'm taking this angle here to find where the cuff of the pants should go. Oh boy, I think that's going to barely fit. And I'm making a compositional blunder, but that will, again, this is an exercise, and I'm going to tell myself that to let myself off the hook a little bit, but I know in my heart that I should have spent a little bit more time making sure that I don't do this, the center of the figure a bit more. Oh well, it is what it is. So this is, that's what's looking off to me. I'm looking at this angle here. Bring this down. I need to place that line a little bit better. And so I've got a few different strategies. You know, there's, again, thinking about the positive and negative space, so the shape of the leg as well as the shape of the forms around that leg. And then also employing angle sighting, comparative measuring. So I'm going to do that angle sighting again. And what I'm doing is I'm kind of looking at this angle from, you know, his hip there where it meets the bench, which might have to come down a little bit farther. And I'm kind of looking at this angle, see where it passes through his leg, his ankle, into his foot. And it's actually, I think it's pretty darn close, but something feels off. So what can happen is there's a moment in the drawing where your brain starts to recognize it as a three-dimensional form as opposed to these two-dimensional shapes on the surface. And it's in that transition period from the 2 dimensions to the 3 dimensions where things can get really tricky, because your brain is, you know, it's all about, your brain is designed to make sense of this figure, and when an object is when it's 3-dimensional and it's in a space, your brain has to fight the 2-dimensional information, the shape that it makes on the page, with the 3-dimensional understanding of that form. So, you know, so for example, we know that this leg is receding back, and that can influence how we perceive that shape because we know it to be longer than the optical information might give us here. You know, so as a 2-dimensional shape, it's actually very narrow, but we know it to be a longer form as it recedes in space. So that's what's kind of happening right here, is that I'm trying to fight those two different understandings of the form. I see it as a 2-dimensional shape and it looks off, and that's influencing how I understand it as a 3-dimensional form, and vice versa. So hopefully that makes sense. I see a bunch of comments coming in, so I want to check this. Thank you for those comments, Rilisha. Rocket 434, I'm glad to hear that your drawings are improving. That's what this is all about. My drawings are improving as well, and I have to be kind to myself and recognize that I'm going to have days that are off, and that's what this whole show is about. And hopefully you are as well. We're going to do a lot of drawings in our lives, and if we put the pressure on ourselves to make each one the best we've ever done, it kind of sucks the joy out of it, or it can. So let's see, Sue is saying left sleeve seems to come too low compared to the right sleeve. Okay, let me look into that. And those are some really good points to use as reference. So let me go back to that real quick. Yes. Yeah, I'm thinking this feels like it needs to come up a little bit. So I'm doing some just angle sighting across there, and that can be refined further. If anybody else sees other things that are off, this shape is off in here that I need to correct as well. You know, again, feel free to call that out if you're new and you're seeing comments that say, hey, all of these things are wrong in the drawing. Just know that I'm asking for it. That's what we're here to do. And I want these observations. This is how we work together as a community, and why kind of critiques and working in classes can be so valuable, is when you can find somebody who gives that feedback that you need. It can be really, it's a tremendous value. So, and you all are very good at giving me good feedback. So I'm just kind of giving myself a little bit more information here. This is far too bright. I can knock this down with some of that graphite there. But I'm trying to see this shape. That this just feels too short. And one of the other things that I'm confronting right now is seeing it from this angle in person versus what I'm seeing on the screen in front of me, which is what you're seeing, which is vertically. So a change in proportions there. So I look down here, I'm like, it's not so bad. And then I look at what the camera is capturing and something seems off. So that, again, those kind of goes to show how important changing the context is. So what I should be doing in a normal studio setting is setting this up, pushing it away from me and looking at it from a distance and seeing it vertically, because I'm working it this way. And ideally I would be drawing vertically as well. So have the photo, have the drawing side by side vertically, where there's no perspective distortion. So let me give myself just a little bit more information to suggest that sock. And I think I need to erase, he's got that bit of his lower leg showing there. How does that work? Let's see. And this blob that represents this shoe is too distracting. It's not. I need to refine that a little bit more. Now, when it comes to drawing feet and shoes, I know that tripped me up for a long time, and it still does. I'm not going to say that I'm got this thing down to a T, but what I've found to be helpful is to squint and try to see that overall shape. We can often rely, especially with hands and feet, but in drawing in general, we have we are confronted by the concept of the symbol system, and the idea that there are preconceived notions about what an object looks like and how we should draw it. So when we think about how we draw early on, we'll often draw a symbol of an eye or a symbol of a face, a circle with two dots and a mark to represent the nose, right? And those early drawings develop what's called that symbol system. And again, it's not just how we draw something, but how it looks. It influences how we perceive the forms. And so we're often confronted by that. And what we can do is we'll kind of rely on those early kind of processes to draw things, and we'll stop looking at the way it actually looks, if that makes sense. And so when drawing from life or drawing representationally like this, we're drawing things that physically exist in nature and are with an intention of making this drawing look like that photo. It helps us to confront that symbol system. We become more specific, become better observers, and it's not necessarily the only way to draw, but it can be helpful to draw from life as a way to help break those preconceived notions, expand your visual library, your tool set a little bit more. So if you draw a lot from memory or from imagination, I think there's also value in drawing from life periodically to challenge those skills. Because ultimately, all drawing happens in the mind, right? It all forms there, all understanding. And so whether you're drawing from life or whether you're drawing from observation, the source is the same. What happens when you draw from life, or in this manner from a photograph, now we just have something physical that says, all right, is our mental image as executed by in our drawing, does that mental image match the physical image in front of us? And then we have very specific tools that we can use to get those two to align. And when you're drawing from drawing from imagination or something like that, or drawing from memory, you may not have that. Like you're comparing the end result to something different. So I think there's value in doing all of it. I'd be curious how you all feel. If anybody gets stuck with that, or All right, so it's feeling a little bit better. Let me double check the proportions here. Again, I'm going to take that basic unit, the height of the head, compare that to his leg, and double check that. And it's better than I thought it was going to be. It's closer than I thought it would be. This has got to come down, I think, a little bit farther. What needs to happen? Anybody see what's wrong with my leg here? This one right here specifically? Something is wrong. It just feels too short. And I need to correct it somehow. All right, maybe what I can do is take a different measurement. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking this distance here, comparing it. Ah, that's it right there. So I've got to bring this shoe down here. That's at least one of the things that needs to happen. Okay. That feels actually better. Like, so it may not, I was thinking that this felt too short, which it may still be. What is possible is because this stretch here of his sock and ankle and the shoe was too short. That feels better. Okay. Mad moments ago, the model is laying back more, so he's kind of leaning backwards. Let me see if I can, I'll see if I can work that out when I come back into here and add those details, but thanks for bringing that. You can see, yeah, you can definitely see him leaning back more. Cynthia, I love those comments that you've learned so much. You haven't, I actually don't have even one perfect picture, but I'm having a lot of fun. That's awesome. That makes me smile. Alice, thank you for those comments. Welcome. Definitely try back later. Again, we meet every week, and each episode is different subject. I'm glad, Alicia, that the squinting has helped. All right. Oh, and then Sue is saying maybe too wide, the legs. So that is possible. Yeah, so I think kind of going back to Mad Moments Go, and Sue, your comments, I think they kind of work together in a way that, getting the slant right may affect things. Again, this is where we're kind of in between the two-dimensional understanding of the form and the three-dimensional understanding. And so as we start to understand it as a three-dimensional object, doesn't quite work. We recognize that the proportions are off. This can, like I said, it can be hard to identify, whether what it is that is throwing that off. All right, so I'm going to take a kind of an angle sight from that upper cuff to the lower one. So I think this is pretty darn close here. And what an interesting shape these feet make. Take an angle for the foot, and what I want to try to do is see this basic shape here. Yeah, when you think about hands and feet, holy smokes, those are the things that really trip up a lot of people, and you'll see some great artists that just crop feet out altogether, or hands out altogether from a photo, or a painting, and I totally get it. If you don't get them right, it can be really distracting, and so sometimes it's actually better to keep it simple and keep it just a simple shape, a suggestion of that, and versus rather than going into great in terms of the detail for those areas. And so So let me look at this. What I'm seeing now is just, I'm looking at the relationship between the legs and that shadow behind him. So I need to bring this down, make sure that they intersect more. So the other key feature when getting proportions right is really paying attention to the places that intersect, you know, where those points of intersection in the subject. Those are the physical connections between various elements in the drawing, and it can make a big difference in how the proportions come together when you look at physically where do these things overlap. So now I've got to bring this down here, and that helps that shape in here that was bothering me earlier. Okay. So we can see, if you look back at the beginning, really rough gesture, gradually refining, and we're going to keep getting there. All right, I'm just going to clear off the debris. I think now when I get back in and add a little bit more detail, adding, so now I'm going to target the folds, the darker areas in the fabric here. I do want to check, the sock part should be longer. Elisa's saying, JC, I had a missed figure sketching, so I missed figure sketching, so I decided to do 2 quick half-hour sketches. Awesome! That's very cool. 1 graphite and 1 Concave. That's awesome. I'm so glad you shared that. Concave, that keeps coming up as a, as a material, and I need to do something with that. And then Jessica saying, Scott, look at the bottom of the shoe on the bent leg in relationship to the end of the pants on the extended leg. Yeah, so yes, those are good observations here. So relating this to this, yeah, and then this opening here, so they don't quite align, is what I'm seeing. I think that's what you're pointing out. And so when I need to resolve that somehow. So either this extends down farther or this goes up, and I think I'm going to come back to that. But I think that's a really good observation. Thank you. Those are 2 great points that I kind of missed. Like as I was looking at the this back shadow, that's a great tool to use to make those connections. And I kind of had missed that I was focusing on this and then this, but not that whole span across. So thank you. All right. So as I work in this, I'm switching to that tripod grip, and I'm going to try to kind of sketch through this since we're an hour and a half in. I may not get as much detail in this as I would like. And as I'm working on this, I'm trying to pay attention to the direction of the hatch marks. And so if you see a shadow that runs down this way, it can be helpful to kind of lightly indicate that path, but then create it with hatch marks that run in a different direction, and that'll read more effectively as a shadow. Because if it runs along that line, you know, so if we have a shadow that is a thin stripe that is vertical, and we have those marks run parallel to that, it can sometimes read as like a stripe rather than a shadow, and we want it to read as a shadow. So you can start to think about the cross contour information. So those are marks that you make within the form that suggest the three-dimensional form. So whereas a contour mark defines the outer edge of a three-dimensional object, the cross contour is an indication of the form within that contour. So what I'm trying to do is target the the shadow shapes that I'm seeing. Now looking at kind of the negative space here under the collar. And this is where, you know, things can be off often a little bit sometimes. You know, if you get the major form correct, it can be, you can be off with some of these things, but sometimes it's the little things that can make all the difference in the world. So like getting this dark line here that represents the, you know, the edge of his arm. You know, if you get that placed incorrectly, then it can have a big impact on how we perceive his pose, his structure. So I want to kind of move things along a little bit. So I'm just kind of sketching a little bit more. I think rather than really polishing up the drawing, I think I need to do that more. And I want to refine this shape. So notice on here, it's angled a bit more at the bottom. So I'm just trying to work through a bit more quickly. And so it might be, you know, it might be a little bit more expressive with the lines than I was earlier with the preparatory sketch. And what I like about this stage is that if I'm feeling confident in the overall proportions, I can really zero in on the specifics. You know, this is where, you know, I can look at those details. And I can get kind of sucked into them a little bit more. Just have, and also just have fun making marks. All right, so as I'm looking at these, I'm trying to observe the folds, and I'm trying to bring a little bit more life to some of these contours. Oh, and then he's got these fingers that are kind of peeking out behind his elbow. Didn't even notice those before. I'm saving the face for last because that was really hard. In the preparatory one, it was really hard. So I'm kind of delaying that a little bit. Full disclosure there. I'm really nervous about that one. We'll see how it comes together. So, all right. So one of the things that I think is going to be important here is to capture that the depth back to from the knee to the hip there. So how do I want to do that? Let me think. So I think what I want to do is I want to emphasize this edge here to hopefully pop that forward. So I'm going to apply more of a line. See if that kind of pops out. Now I want to break that line up though, so that it doesn't actually work against that. I want to, and rather than one single line, have that be broken. And if anything, I think darkening here will help to bring that forward. And then going back to so Jessica's comment about relating these two together, I want to pay a lot of attention to that here because I'm starting to make more permanent marks. So I just want to make sure that I don't lose sight of that as a feature and just kind of get locked into this initial drawing. So what I'm doing is kind of working from the front and then moving backwards with the intent of trying to create that depth. And then hopefully what happens is that as I bring this forward, it creates that slant that we were mentioning earlier about the, as he's leaning against the wall. It was that Mad Moments Ago that would mention that. Okay. So contrast plays a role here. So one of the things that had happened is because I defined that edge there, that's bringing that forward. So I'm switching to here, and I may end up having to lighten up some of those marks. But I'm going to try to create some contrast between them first by darkening these. So looking at the shapes that of those folds there, and now I need to connect those across visually. And I'm just going to keep working on this area until they feel like they're connected, but there's enough variation that it really recedes. And this whole thing needs to be a little bit darker so I can wash this whole thing. Bring out the blending stump. I haven't really used a blending stump here. So this, during the preparatory drawing, it occurred to me that how often I was going back and these marks here that I essentially creating as permanent as final marks I end up doing them over and over again. You kind of just keep coming back to them. I'm just blending here with the stump. That smooths out some of the darks. And this could be an opportunity to kind of render the arms a little bit. So I've got this old blending stump that's really loaded with graphite, and it can be a really effective tool for some of these lighter forms here in the flesh. So I'm targeting the dark areas here, and then I'm going to lift with the eraser some of the highlights. Kind of curious to see how that brings it to life a little bit more. So bringing out the retractable eraser there, kind of starting with the brightest area, targeting that, and then building out some of the others. So right in here, that really catches off that part of the arm here. And then right at this elbow here, I got to really lean in on that. So those points catch the light a little bit more. So I want the drawing to show an understanding of that. All right, that's feeling a little bit better, a little bit more contrast there. How's everybody doing? Rocket434, do I have an Instagram? Yeah, they're in the description below. There's my Instagram account, but you can also share your work on artistnetwork.com. So you can, in the chat here or in the description, you can find the links to the show pages where you can share your work if you're working directly with this. But I've also had people email me, and it's been awesome to meet everybody. All right, so I'm feeling better about this whole area here. So now I'm going to move back down. I want to get back to Jessica's comments there about the relationship between between these areas. So using the bottom of the shoe to help place the this leg here, and I think this actually needs to come up. All right, so this is an interesting shape here. The tip of the shoe, and I don't quite have the precision I need with that eraser, so I'm kind of erasing a larger area. And then, I'm going to refine it from there. And at this stage, I'm really looking at it through blurred vision. It looks like I'm focusing, like staring deeply at it, but I'm just trying to isolate that area, but that's out of focus so that I can see this as a two-dimensional shape and not be impacted by the three-dimensional understanding of the foot. That makes sense. If anything I'm describing here doesn't make sense, or if you have entirely different opinions, that's what this show is about, so let me know. Yeah, that sock can come up a little bit, close that gap a bit. They're so dark that it's hard to see any sort of form, but I think it gets darker right under here. And then I can barely see the dark kind of ellipse there on that cuff. So now that shoe is really clumsy, so I got to fix that. I'll wipe that down. I'm going to come back to it. Now that I've added a little bit more information, I'm going to bounce back over here. And refine this area, refine that shape. This one's a lot of fun. The truck gave me a lot of trouble last week. It ended up being a lot more fun than I kind of had anticipated. But man, it was a challenge. So I'm looking at the specific form here. Again, now we've got that general axis, but now if we were to follow along that edge, look closely at that, the interactions between the concave and the convex forms there that make these complex areas. Let's see, it's really kind of tricky in this area. Kind of suggests the creases here in the pants. I haven't done much with the blending stump today, but all right, okay. Checking out the comments here. Let's see. Mad Moments Go say normally get the face out of the way, then get that done first. I got to save it towards the end, although it is tough. It's a tricky thing when I do it this way because I may lose my momentum entirely and be exhausted at the part that needs the most attention. And then Sue is saying, need to curve the right arm where it goes behind the left arm and forms a V. Yes, this part right in here, I kind of, didn't make that quite as clear. It's a good observation there. Don, I like your comments here. A Filipino who loves charcoal portraits, but I think the charcoal itself doesn't like me. That's a great comment. Yeah, charcoal is kind of like a love-hate medium. Some people really dig it. I love it, but it can fight you. All right, I'm going to be getting to the face there, Nell Art, pretty soon. I got to get this shoe working for me. I think I want to just suggest this. I want to sketch the shoe a bit more here. And I'm going to focus on getting this one right first. So I do need to speed things up. And as best you can, if you're struggling with this foot, try to see it as a two-dimensional shape. Let the viewer's mind fill in that information, those details. My eraser is a bit heavy, or kind of dull at this point, so I might need to sharpen it. So I'm just going to take this over here. This is what I do to my rubber eraser. Give myself a nice chisel tip, just like that. And that gives me a little bit more precision. And then this. My first attempt at this shoe, for several attempts, they were just a bit too heavy-handed. So I need to be a little bit more delicate around that edge. If it's going to be off, I don't want to draw too much attention to it by making a dark line around it. So it's part of what I'm thinking is sometimes you see that in some really amazing drawings and paintings. You get to these parts that are essentially unfinished, but you don't notice them at first, and you almost get a sense from the artist just saying, I'm just gonna kind of ignore this area. Don't look over here. There's nothing to see over here. And you're not gonna see the errors in the proportions or something. So I think I want to try to make this read like that as well. Just kind of let it kind of sit a little bit. And maybe just let it fall into the depth of the shadow here. Lower that contrast. Don't draw attention to it as much because it's wrong, but that's all right. We kind of talked a bit about this last week too. You're just kind of contemplating the difference between sketching and drawing, and for me, it's kind of like this. It's like the rule about squares and rectangles. That squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. And in this case, I'm kind of going back and forth between it being a rendered drawing and thinking about it more as a sketch. But it all involves drawing. It's all drawing. For me, drawing is about pulling the image out on the page. Sometimes you can just get excited by marks, even if they aren't quite as accurate. There's an abstract quality to drawing that I think can be really engaging. Sometimes you just have fun going wild, making fun marks. All right, and I haven't really sharpened the pencil yet. It's one of the advantages to working with this overhand grip is that, in these broad areas here, I can work with the overhand and just sharpening the tip here. Bring this out a little bit more. Give a little bit more information back here. Okay, let's see. What do I need to do here? I think I still need a little bit more life to this knee. It's feeling a little flat. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to darken it around here. I want to just create more contrast so that we had a change in value as we move up that leg. So Doing a little bit of drawing with the eraser. Just kind of very similar to working with the graphite. You're paying attention to pressure and edges, things like that. I think as I come across here, I want to sharpen this up by a little bit of reflected light, kind of catching on the top of that leg. And I'm going to cut into that. It's a bit too strong. And then maybe a little bit more refinement up in the knee. And if it's too bright, you can kind of wipe it down. And the other thing that can help to bring this leg up is that if we follow back along this contour here, you break up that edge. So I'm looking particularly at the folds in the shirt that cut behind that leg, and that'll help to bring that forward. All right, and then the same with here. What I don't like is that there's this dark fold there that travels right up into that knee. It's creating this tangent where you have two different elements that are in different places in space, but because they share a similar location on the page, they flatten each other out. And so what I might actually do is artificially drop this down a little bit, create more of a distinct overlap, give myself a little bit more ammunition to work with by doing that. Rather than make it look exactly like the photo, I'm fudging it to help me bring that knee forward a bit more. Okay, and that feels a bit better. Ooh. I hope my camera's not going to die on me again. Looks like it's back, but last week it died. So I better get moving onto the face. So I'm switching back to the 3B. It's a little bit harder. And what I kind of learned in doing the preparatory sketch is that I just need to be a little bit more delicate there. So I'm going to let this be. I don't know if I'm going to finish this part of the drawing. Maybe that's something I finish up off screen, and then I'll post on the site just like I did with the truck drawing last week. But let me just, how do I tackle this head now? Let's see. I feel like I've got the general shape established. Now I need to refine it, but I want to refine it in the right way. And what I mean by that is it's easy to cancel out the gesture when you start to refine something. So a gesture drawing may have all this life to it and kind of capture the movement and the kind of the expression of the pose. And then we get in there and add the details, and things just kind of stiffen up. And we kind of, these graceful curves then just become rigid. And I want to avoid that as much as possible here and create more of a relaxed feel to his head. So I'm looking at that angle on the neck. I'm going to pull that back a little bit more. Let's see. And I'm going to switch back and forth between thinking about the positive space and then that negative space there in the head. And I haven't refined this edge here. I'm starting with this back one because I feel like that angle is what captures the expression a bit more, that it captures that pose. So I want to build everything from that angle. So I'm closing one eye, I'm doing some angle sighting, and I'm just comparing it to some of the key angles like this here, that shadow along the jaw and cheek, and then this angle here, which is, it's greater than I kind of initially saw it. It's a greater angle, steeper angle than I thought. Do a little bit of negative drawing around that ear. I'm not going to erase that out yet. Okay. I want to get this angle here along the chin. That feels good. Angle sight the axis. So when I'm looking at the axis, what I'm trying to visualize is the center line running right, between the eyes, down the nose, down across the mouth, the chin, and seeing what that angle is. Okay. And then get the axis for the eyes. And I can transfer that same axis for the nose and the mouth. And if I just keep those marks light, I'll be in good shape, better shape. If you want to sneak up on these a bit more. And so I find that this is where I really float around. As you see, like I'll make a little bit of mark for the eye and then move on to something else. Another little mark for the eye, and then move to something else. And part of that is just because it takes a lot of concentration, and I just need to clear my head a little bit. And then this whole edge is very ambiguous. So what do I need to do here? And I know there are people that have different approaches to this, so this is where it'd be interesting to hear how you all approach drawing the head. Do you start with the features and work your way out to the outer edges, find the rest of the shape of the head, or do you kind of build the form and then build the features into that? Okay. Boy, this is really tricky because I'm fighting the urge to change the proportions. We built everything around the proportion, the height of the head, right? And I feel like this is too small. And if I make it bigger, is that going to throw everything else off? And it's one of those things too, the more you focus on something, the more it takes up, more brain space it takes up. So we have a tendency to view it as larger, and at least I do. And that's the part that I really struggle with, is now that I'm focusing so much on the face and the head, because it's taking up more mental space, I'm thinking about it as being larger than it actually is. So I don't know how to double check this. It's so small. It's such a small portion of the drawing. Every little thing is gonna, if I'm off by just the slightest amount, it's gonna make a big difference. So that's why I'm really nervous about this one. Let's see, Don. I do practicing a cup of coffee, shadows and contrasts. It's hard to determine the right tool or which charcoal pencil I have to use. Oh, those are some interesting comments there, Don. I know I have a few episodes with a cup of coffee, and I think they were both done in charcoal, and that might be helpful to kind of watch through. I use generally 2 grades of charcoal pencil, the 2B and the 4B. And then vine charcoal. So start the drawing with a vine charcoal, refine it with a 2B, and then build the darkest darks with the 4B, typically. Okay. So what you saw me do there is I'm trying to visualize the basic structure of the head. And you think it has the face, right? And then it turns down the sides. And it's got a rounded quality to it. But as best I can, I'm trying to see that structure. What looks off here? So I think his neck looks too long here, which is why I'm feeling like the face is off, you know, it feels too small. So now I need to come back in, and now I need to clean this up here a little bit. Lift that off. And then rebuild. So it's helpful to have an initial, you know, make initial marks there, but then adjust. You know, we're constantly correcting. And I think there was a, Jessica saying ear in relationship to the eyes will create the right angle to set the gestures at the start. Yes, that's a really good observation there. So the eyes and the ears are related very well to one another. The height of the ears is equivalent to the height of the nose, and they're often kind of in alignment with the eyes. And so that becomes a critical relationship to establish, and which is one of the reasons I hadn't locked in that ear yet. So because I needed to now kind of refine the chin in that jawline and let that help place things. And so I can move up and you can start to, as you visualize a path around the head, it's not quite the correct angle. In the way there. Okay, that's better right in here. And you can start to create that relationship between the ears and the eyes. But again, it's so small that the slightest difference is going to make the slightest variation is going to make a big difference in the overall proportion. So it's just a matter of taking your time and really, you know, it's like I'm not much of an athlete, but I think about it and I'm probably thinking about it incorrectly, but thinking about it in relationship to a boxing match, you know, somebody who's very nimble, you're moving around and you're taking punches and you're constantly moving, right? And that's kind of the way I think about it with the features like this, is making a little note and moving to another spot and then coming at it a different way, because it's so easy to get locked in into one area. Okay, so I'm starting to just basically map it out, and a lot of it is just these light touches on the paper. And so now what I want to do is I want to try to see the shadow shape of that eye socket. Not drawing the eyes, I'm drawing that shadow shape. It's got fairly soft edges, but you can kind of see this shape here. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to magnify my reference, and you can't see this because it's on my screen. There, that helps me to see the specific shapes a little bit more. It's a little bit far from me. So if you have your if you have the reference image open, if you're new, you're going to know that the reference image is in the description below. It can help to identify that shadow shape here. And what's nice about the kneaded eraser is that you can shape it however you need. And take multiple stabs at this. You know, so you might try it, lift it off, try it again, lift it off until you get the shape that you need, especially like I said, when you're working at such a small scale. You know, it doesn't take much to indicate these features, but take your time. All right, now I'm going to try to, it was a bit of a clumsy erasing there. kind of sharpened his cheek a little bit more. Okay, so just like I did with the eyes, where I'm targeting the shape of the shadows that they make, I want to do that with the nose. And so I have kind of a rough placement of it, and what I'm looking at is the shape of that shadow on the underside. Here, this is where drawing with the blending stump might actually be helpful. So let me take this out. It's kind of just more of a gentler, it's a more gentle thing. I actually wonder if I can, let me zoom in there. How's that? Is that better? Jessica, I see your comments here. I'm going to read those. Debald 8. The head seems to as tall as the distance from the chin to the arm. So taking this distance here, comparing that. Let me take that head. Yes, you're right. And so I feel like this needs to come down here. Again, so small. So what we're looking at is this distance here from the top of the head to the chin, equaling from the chin to the top of the arm, which is pretty close to where we've got right here. If I lock that in now to as the chin. Bring that back, and then the ear might come in there. This is a tough one, guys. Thank you. Jessica, I see your comment. Scott, the forehead is wider than the face, narrowing towards the chin. Yes. Right in here. So what I want to do is that there's kind of a boxy quality to his jaw here. And if I establish this shadow shape here, let me soften that. Bring that ear down here. This is a long episode today, so I appreciate you all sticking with me for this one. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to try to wrap it up soon. But so now what I want to do is there's that hairline there along the forehead that I want to relate to that. So I'm going to take an angle sighting, carry that across to the, all right, that works there. I don't know if that's in focus very well, so let me see if I can. There, that might be a little bit better. Sharpen that up, and we'll get in there in the face. And back to the blending stump to render this portion here. And I'm going to get back to the shadow under the nose. And then into his mouth there. Let's see, and what I want to do is I want to now observe this kind of path. It's getting a little blotchy, so I need to clean up with the eraser. And I want to I'm observing this structure here. So lifting where the light is striking the cheek, but it kind of wraps around the side and it creates this kind of zigzag around his eye. So that's what I need to pull out. And we get a little light striking here at the corner of the mouth. And then getting that expression on the mouth, that's going to be tricky too. It's so small. So this is a little nerve-wracking. Okay, it's such a tight area in here. I was a bit heavy with that blending stump, but I can tap that out. Maybe refine this a little bit. It's so heavy around that chin, those marks. And I think I made his chin too big. Or the nose could be too short. But again, this is where, you know, even a fraction of an inch can make a big difference overall here. So you just keep taking stabs at them. And this is where I'm looking at it from close, and then I'm looking at it at a distance on the screen to see those adjustments. And then this is just too hard of a line. I thought I'd try to clarify that nose line a little bit more, but that was too much. All right, so thank you all for your patience. I appreciate you all sticking with me. We may call it a day since we're 2 hours and 20 minutes into this, and I've got meetings I need to get to. I've got other parts of the workday I've got to get back to, but this is where I'm having way more fun. Let me see what happens if I just give a little bit more dimension to the eyes. And then what happens is it feels like it's a little bit too dark. So if it comes off too dark, you can just kind of tap with the kneaded eraser, lift up a little bit, and then take another stab at it. And then try to see the specific shape of the mouth. So this is just barely scraping the paper right here. And this is where I might want to zoom back out because I'm so close here on the shot that it's making me a little self-conscious. Seeing all the blemishes that kind of disappear from a distance. So I'm just going to kind of feather out that mark there, maybe refine that jaw line a little bit more. Need to kind of just keep working back and forth with this, and we keep refining the forms, both positive and negative spaces, shapes. Oh, there was a comment earlier about understanding positive and negative space. So the easiest way to think about it is positive space is everything that is the object that you're drawing. Negative space or negative shapes are what's formed around it. So if you're drawing the head, that would be the positive space. The negative shape would be drawing this shape in here that's formed in the space around it. But think I just need to spend a little bit more time really refining that. But I think as an initial sketch, you know, especially if our objective is to kind of simulate what the experience would be like if we were to be on location sketching, trying to capture this guy as he's, I don't know, waiting for the bus or something. You know, you may like this, of course, you know, we had the luxury of him being completely frozen for 2.5 hours. But, you know, we, of course, wouldn't have this in real life. So we'd have to make decisions about what to do. And this just helps us to get to that point of really kind of refining it and refining those proportions. But I'm going to go back through, I think, and I'm going to call it a day for now. I'm going to keep working on it, and I'll post the final drawing on Artist Network so you can see how it turned out. There's a lot of little things that need to be cleaned up. But I think overall it captures the spirit of the scene sufficiently. And I'm exhausted now, but I gotta get on with the day. That's what I love about the show, is it gives us all a chance to take a break from whatever we're doing and just draw. Drawing is like a form of meditation for me. It's kind of just bringing the brain into focus. I know for me, I needed it today. Brain was all over the place, and so grateful for you all taking the time to join me today. We meet every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern. Next week we're drawing oranges. That's right. It's like just a cluster of oranges hanging from a tree. I'm working on toned paper with charcoal and white charcoal, so black and white. Building positive and negative space. We'll be working on that. Working on proportions, but kind of shifting gears more towards a still life than the figure. Check out some of the past episodes if you were following along. I'd love to see your drawings. So thank you. I do want to take a bit of a time. There's a bit of a lag here, so I don't want to sign off before I get to some of these questions or comments. But I appreciate all the observations. You were all very helpful in bringing this together for me, so thank you. Rocket 434, how is it that you have such steady hands? Can you maybe give tricks to make calmer because my hand is trembling so much? Oh, interesting. You know, I don't know really. I don't know if I have anything, but let me think about it. You know, I think having a variety of pencil grips at your disposal can be really helpful. So right now, for example, I've got this raised bar on my drawing table that I can lean on, and it keeps my hand off the page, gives me some stability. When if you hold it, your pencil with a tripod grip like this, you have a lot of precision. It's all down to your fingertips. You switch to an overhand grip like this, and it's a different type of thing. Your wrist gets locked, and it's more about drawing from the arm. And then if you kind of create a modified grip, something like this, where you're wedging it between your fingers, stabilizing with your fingertips, you can use the side of the pencil. And you can kind of stabilize with the knuckles of your fingers a little bit more. And again, you kind of rest it on your drawing table, or if you have like another support, like a maul stick or something like that, can be really helpful. So there's a lot of different ways that we do it. My hands are covered in graphite, as you can see, and that's all been smudging this drawing. So the way I draw, I have to be comfortable making a mess and using the eraser to draw, but for some people that doesn't really work for them. So I don't know if that helps at all, but I think practice with a variety of grips to help with that and see if that leads to anything. So just making some marks here. So let's see. Let's see, maybe a bit of a smile would make him look more pleasant. Yes, Steve-Ald, yeah, he's a bit grumpy right now, but I'll give him a bit of an upturn in the mouth to make him a little bit happier. Let's see. I'm glad you all enjoyed the project. Thank you all. Oh, Sue, I see your comment. Using an armrest would help. Yes, you got there too. So, and then yeah, with a sheet of paper underneath, it can be helpful. I kind of like actually getting dirty on there because it helps to unify all the marks. It keeps kind of smudging together, and then you got to go back in and kind of clean up. But like I said, that doesn't work for everybody. So a sheet of paper like you're suggesting, I think would be really helpful to protect the drawing in some areas. All right, looks like all the questions came through. So thank you all. Appreciate your patience. This is a long one, but we got through it-ish. I'm going to keep working on this. Hopefully post it either today or tomorrow, along with getting everything set up for next week. Have a great week. If you're in Colorado, hopefully you're dug out from all the snow. Everybody stay safe. We'll see you all in a week.